Hello, my name is Mihir Apte. I am a student in the 9th grade at the Orchid School, Pune. Today, I wish to talk to you about something I've thought about for years, and I hope that at least some of you will understand and relate to what I am trying to say. Before I moved into middle school, I had complete and unerring faith in the education system. I unquestioningly followed what I was taught to the T and did all I could to please my teachers. I suppose you could say that by the yardstick of what we praise in India, I was a model student. We praise those around us that fit this conventional yardstick and admonish those who don't. At a subconscious level at least, from birth, we are taught that it is an ideal to aspire to. The notion that there is more to life than mugging up academic material and giving exam after exam seems alien and naive. Honestly, this shouldn't surprise us. Because if we teach our children, generation after generation, to ignore their passions and focus only on school and exams, what else can we expect? You see, I too grew up in a household that valued academic success. I grew up seeing my relatives getting into IITs and becoming neurosurgeons, and I was dead set on doing the same, achieving academic excellence. But when I moved into high school, I realized that the world around me isn't as perfect as it seemed. I started to see the flaws in the system that I had so diligently subscribed to year after year. You see, I was a very sheltered child, and while I still am to a great extent, at that point in time, I believed in the goodness of human beings and the institutions they establish. Of these, the one I had the most amount of faith in was the education system. I thought that getting good marks in school was the only indication that someone was intelligent. The standard for success in life for me was scoring well on tests, getting into a well-ranked college, and amassing wealth. I realized that rote memorization, or as we call it in India, ratta, is a terrible measure of intelligence, but that it is the only skill required to do well in school exams. I discovered the joys of the arts and music, and I uncovered the power of public speaking and philosophy. But all this was too little, too late. My workload due to school studies had increased, and with the people around me constantly saying, "Forget everything and focus on your studies," I was overcome with guilt, even to consider pursuing my passions outside of school. I'm sure this story sounds all too familiar to most of you, and many of you must have had similar experiences. As a student, one of the most devastating things that can happen to you is to realize that you don't actually believe in what you've been working for. I've mulled this over for years, and I'm definitely not the first to do so. All the same, this realization should not be brushed aside as growing up, and we shouldn't be told to deal with it, because ultimately it is a problem, and it is within our power to fix it. This talk will focus on four main aspects of this problem: rote learning, syllabus-related problems, student stress and exam centrism, and the stifling of creativity. This talk aims not to provide solutions, but only to bring awareness and perhaps inspire you to fight for a change. For now, we will focus on these problems from the point of view of a student who is a part of the system. To start, let's consider the first problem, rote learning. The exams our educational institutions conduct rely so heavily on rote learning that understanding takes a backseat to repetition. A student's proficiency in a subject is measured not by their ability to understand a subject, but by their ability to mug up a textbook. Let me ask you a question. How many of you can tell me exactly when the Second Battle of Panipat took place? Or for that matter, whom it was fought between? Naturally, these questions seem insignificant and trivial, and yet these are exactly the kind of questions examiners ask students. It clearly doesn't matter to them whether the student has understood anything from the material or not, so long as they can mug up these useless factoids and write them on an answer sheet. It doesn't matter whether they learn life skills such as navigating politics and communicating effectively, because ultimately that isn't the goal of education in India. In the 21st century, where information of all kinds is available at our fingertips, is it really that important to know these technicalities? Should a student be trained to remember inconsequential details or take away teachings that are far more important? I can, with the tap of a button, answer any of these idiotic questions that rely only on memorization. Imagine just how ridiculous and futile it feels for a student that has to spend countless hours committing to memory what can be Googled within an instant. it's demoralizing. That feeling of why should I learn this when it will probably never again matter to me is so defeating. Next, of course, we can consider the coursework itself. There is one foundational error in the coursework we study. As we students learn, we often get only one perspective on the matter, or the text falls disappointingly short of explaining the concept in a digestible manner. We learn mathematics formulas and apply them in exams that judge very little but our computational abilities. A student's proficiency in maths should not be measured by their ability to do difficult calculations, but by their understanding of the concepts and their ability to apply them when their application itself is not so obvious. We are taught Indian history from the point of view of the British colonists. Not to sound cliché, but there are stories of suffering and courage, pain and martyr that we so often ignore. Of course, the problems aren't limited to the maths and history syllabus. The science syllabus too is limited in its scope. Concepts are not taught in depth, and intuitive explanations for why things are the way they are not thought of as relevant. These are, however, the least of our concerns. Let me ask you this. How many of you feel that being able to communicate well is essential? Okay, now think, how often did my teachers in school emphasize the importance of these soft skills? Did anyone ever teach me to communicate well? I have been fortunate enough to go to a school that encourages the development of these abilities. But when I interact with my peers from other schools, I feel an acute lack of this capability. Financial literacy is practically unheard of in Indian schools, and money is such a taboo topic that we are never taught how to properly manage it and make good use of it. Either you can pick the commerce stream in the 11th grade, or there's no reason for you to understand your own finances and the economy. Most of us fail to grasp how the capitalist economy completely works and how we play a part in it. We are not taught how to file tax returns, and from a young age we are told that discussing money matters is bad. I understand that these conversations are uncomfortable, but to simply ignore these gaping holes in our syllabi and brush them off is not going to work. Of course, what talk about education in India would be complete without addressing the elephant in the room: student stress and exam centrism. Our education system revolves around the idea that exams are the ultimate measure of success. I have had my fair share of struggles with this exam-centered mindset of the system. This past year, for my social studies term exam, I studied for hours and hours. I stopped going to my extracurricular classes and spent the entire day in my room. I got sucked into the rabbit hole of exam stress. No matter how much I prepared, I always felt unsure. The night before the exam, I struggled to go to sleep. And when I finally did, I had nightmares about my exam. Twice, I woke up in a cold sweat, barely able to think straight. When I awoke the next day, my mother told me that I had been sleep-talking the whole night. This obviously wasn't the end of the world, and I'm not trying to exaggerate the experience I had, but even this level of stress for a simple term exam is worrying. Moreover, one must remember that this is only the tip of the iceberg. I have support systems in the form of my parents and my friends, and I can at least somewhat efficiently deal with my problems. But thousands of students aren't as privileged as me. Their parents often pressurize them to do better, failing to empathize with their children's struggles. Some children have to work for their livelihood and study on top of that. For such children, going to an excellent college becomes an escape from their unfortunate realities. I applaud those that succeed in this stress-inducing system, for they truly deserve it. But for every one that succeeds, there are hundreds that fail miserably due to no fault of their own. From 1995 to 2019, India lost 1.7 lakh students to suicide. In 2021 alone, we lost 13,089 students. I grieve for these children and their families. In a system where one exam can be the difference between getting into a great college and not pursuing higher education at all, these numbers shouldn't be surprising. One can take the example of competitive exams like JEE and NEET. Students get 1 or maybe 2 attempts for these exams in a year, and if they fail at these, they must wait for an entire year till they can attempt it again. A well-prepared student may lose their place in a top institution due to unforeseeable circumstances. A blind student who topped his 12th boards and was overall an excellent pupil in his school days was not permitted to appear for JEE in spite of being incredibly capable. He was deprived of this opportunity simply because the government was not able to provide the facilities required. In response, he turned his efforts to gaining admission in foreign universities, and due to his hard work and sheer brilliance, he succeeded in securing a scholarship to Stanford University. A perfectly capable, well-rounded student was lost to the Indian education system because it failed to provide for his needs, even just for one exam. Fundamentally, the system is flawed. One exam result should not have the power to determine your life's path. Even when we consider other popular exams such as the SATs, they are doing a far better job. There are 7 batches conducted for the SATs throughout the year, and a student may appear as many times as they want. Isn't that a more sensible method of doing things? Lastly, as we navigate through classrooms, are we stifling creativity? Are our rigid structures allowing our students to think beyond the curriculum? The Indian education system was not designed to train thinkers and employers, but to train civil servants and employees who do not think for themselves but follow what their superiors tell them. This attitude is seen in most schools to this day. Dissent is frowned upon, and when students ask logical questions about why things are the way they are reprimanded. The sentence, "Don't talk back to me," is a classic, and I'm sure many of you have heard it at least once in your life, whether you deserved it or not. Not just this, but creative outlets such as the arts are largely ignored and thought of as hobbies, if even that. Art rooms and music classes. These are the places that foster creativity in children. These are the places where they can discover themselves and find peace. What the planners of the education system fail to grasp is that this creative thought is not limited to these places, but is carried into the classroom. And the results are bound to be extraordinary. Creativity is what links the world's greatest musicians, scientists, and mathematicians. The beauty of it is that it is useful regardless of what you choose to pursue. If we aren't going to encourage creativity in classrooms, and we aren't going to provide an outlet for it through extracurriculars, then we are killing it. The brain is a muscle, and the portions of it that we don't exercise will remain weak, and in a figurative sense, will eventually die. Creativity is just one of these portions, and to stifle it is to limit the potential of the student. So far, we've explored the challenges faced by students: rote learning, exam centrism, stifling of creativity, shortcomings in the curriculum, and the alarming rise in student stress. These can all seem very overwhelming. But recognizing a problem is the first step towards finding a solution. I do not claim to be able to provide one, but I do know how I escaped the sense of hopelessness that had a grip on me. I started my talk with a personal anecdote, so it is only fitting that I should end it with one. In school, I have learned values and lessons that will stay with me for life. But more than this, I had teachers who believed in me and my ability to do something great. They imbued me with a sense of self-confidence and purpose that has driven me to this day and will continue to drive me and push me to do better. Whether it was my class teachers or my subject teachers, seeing their passion to teach and the flair and fire with which they taught their subjects always inspired me. Watching them gave me hope. Hope that not every class has to be boring, not every subject has to be dreaded and feared. I came to love the things that I thought I hated. That is what an excellent teacher can do. Their teaching is so compelling that you only desire to study more and make them proud. The solution to our woes must come from us at the grassroots level, because clearly no one in a position of power wants to do anything. I encourage each one of you to engage in your classes. Perhaps you'll come to find your passion where you least expect it. To the teachers of the world, I just want you to know that as long as you teach with passion, you can affect a student's whole life. And all of us are grateful for the effort you put into your classes. Thank you for all for joining me on this journey of reflection and exploration.